Welcome to the Rethink Leadership podcast, available on all platforms including YouTube if you prefer to watch. My name is Jeremy Blaine, CEO of Performance Works International, Executive Director of the Transformational Leadership Acceleration Institute, and Managing Partner of Diversity Talent. My aim is to bring insights from leaders, experts, and highly talented professionals from around the world. Insights, stories, and advice from the front lines of modern leadership to engage, inspire, and mobilize progress back in the workplace. Every episode is a learning opportunity for us all. The Rethink Leadership podcast also supports charities around the world. Each episode is in aid of a cause chosen by my guests, and to date, I'm proud to say we've supported over 60 global and local great causes. Today I welcome Jim Hughes, the founder of Untamed. Through his unique outdoor-focused brand of coaching, events and speaking, Jim has helped leaders and teams everywhere reconnect with themselves, others and with their work. He leverages his experience that encompasses everything from running a multi-million dollar engineering business in Australia to skiing the world's longest giant slalom race wearing only a G-string and pretending to be an electrical engineer for 8 months. He approaches his work how he approaches his life, with energy, commitment and fun, as you can tell. He takes leaders out for walks and talks and opens up authentic discussions. We discuss more about this, Jim's background and his core beliefs that we can all reconnect with ourselves and find new paths to uncover. This episode is in aid of Help for Heroes. We've made a donation as a thank you to Jim for joining us. Help for Heroes is a British charity which supports members of the British Armed Forces community with their physical and mental health, as well as their financial, social and welfare needs. Hi, Jim. Thanks very much for joining me. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your company, Become Untamed, and why the word untamed?
Well, good morning, afternoon, Jeremy. Pleasure to be here. My name is Jim, living in southwest England. I've got here via a very circuitous route, which I won't go into detail right now because it's very long. But ultimately, I run a coaching business called Untamed and have been doing so for 6.5 years, half of which was spent nomadic, living around the world with my now wife, Kim, and the remainder of it being here near Bath. And ultimately, I help people, often leaders, often high performers, be it military, business, sporting world, reconnect with who they truly are, reconnect with those people around them, and reconnect with their work. And I do so preferably outdoors, preferably away from technology, in nature, and having as much fun as possible.
So where did the word untamed come from then? Is that the outdoors bit?
That came from when I was, so the catalyst for the whole business, again, another long story, which I will bore you with at your discretion. It was I was running an engineering business in Australia, which I wasn't inspired by. Ultimately, it wasn't leveraging my gifts. It wasn't allowing my personality to shine. Quite the opposite, in fact. So I started to get this inclination that something was missing, that I was misaligned, that I was muting myself, and all this stuff. So I started to go to all these, like, okay, who am I? What do I want to do next? What am I best at? Who do I want to serve and how? So I started to go into all these events and seminars and reading these books and going to workshops and stuff. And I realized that it was that idea that I was muting my personality that started to come to the surface as something that was really important to me, because I'm somebody who's a little bit different in quite a few ways. I've got a very outgoing, gregarious nature. I've got high energy. I love to jump around. I've been called a puppy more times than I can shake a hairy stick at in my life. And as I was going to these seminars and conferences, and everyone was just sort of milling around, listening to these like boring PowerPoints and wearing name tags, I was like, come on, I'm not the only person here that wants to just get outside, have more fun, be themselves, be a bit of a, excuse my French, dickhead, just not take themselves so seriously. And I was like, oh, actually, that's who I want to help. It's the people who feel like they're hiding that side of themselves. That's where it spawned from. I played around with words like, rough diamond and unearthed and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I settled on Untamed. I think it speaks to a lot of elements of the work I do.
It does actually. And having had the opportunity to have a chat with you and be inspired in that way as well, it's quite taken with where you've gone here. So how would you describe Untamed values?
I think it's it has moved beyond just helping people who are like me. I mean, I work with all sorts of people, from the sort of highly introverted sort of technical types to the creatives to the artists to whatever. So it's more than that. It's more about uncovering the essence of who you are and letting that shine. Not only just letting it shine, but celebrating it, reconnecting with it on a deep level and celebrating it, because that is your greatest gift. And that is what's going to stand you apart from other people. I think it was Judy Garland that said it's better to be a first-rate version of yourself than a second-rate version of somebody else. And that's what it's all about. And then there's obviously lots of tools and methods and concepts I use to enable that to happen with people.
Yeah, I really understand that first-rate version of yourself. And let me go back to something else that you dropped into the conversation earlier on. You talked about some of your clients, they're from the military, they're from business, they're from sports. So when you're trying to uncover that essence, are there any differences across there? Do you have a different approach across there? Similarities?
As in, do I approach the different people in those different industries in a different way?
Well, more in those industries, do you see, or those institution stroke industries, do you find differences stroke similarities that you can mind? So if I come from the military, it might be different in one way from the corporate, it might be different from another, but there's a common link there as well.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, whilst I work with lots of different types, there is only a certain number of things that links all humans, especially the people I work with, and that is often they are highly driven. They are people who love to grow, whether that's financially, personally, professionally, or all three. And they have usually come to me because they are at a crossroads and they don't know the answers, and that annoys the hell out of them because they've always known, or they've at least thought they've always known, and their energy and will has been enough to get them through any short-term challenges. But now they've basically been pushing in the wrong direction for too long, and it's tiring. And so, to answer your question, yes, whether they're in the military or sporting world or the professional world, they are linked by those things, and therefore my approach is broadly similar. There's only so many patterns that connects people, and the more I do it, the more I realize that we're simultaneously incredibly complex and incredibly simple at the same time.
Yeah, I do understand that point. And reading into more about what you do, the core about it is around beliefs. And how do you define, therefore, a belief in that context to the people that you're working with and trying to help answer these questions that they can't seem to start with?
Well, I don't know if it's about defining a belief for them. It's more about helping them realize, A, how many beliefs they carry subconsciously or unconsciously, and how powerful those beliefs are. I mean, we have obvious beliefs like we are religious or we're not. We like football or we don't. We believe that hard work will make us successful and laziness won't. There's some like overt beliefs that society peddles and we kind of get and are reinforced that way. But there are so many, like the vast majority of beliefs that we carry are seemingly benign, and they're just assumptions. Because they're assumptions, we don't even notice they're there. And they're the most powerful ones, and they're often not benign because they are dictating how we think, how we feel, how we act. So helping people identify what those beliefs are, and then quantifying the implications, be it positive or negative, can then allow them to actually say, right, well, which of these do I want to keep? Which of these serve me, and which of these are no longer relevant? Because these beliefs have been, they come from us, of course, everything does, but they have been influenced by our upbringing, by our parenting, by the models of behavior that we experienced. And we took them on board because they suited a narrative, or they were correct at that time. But so often the rules of the game have changed, so the beliefs need to as well.
That's interesting because it opens up the question. There's clearly two sides to a belief. Those beliefs that help propel us forward and keep us going, but those beliefs that may hold us back a little bit. And I'm sure that you're tackling, like you say, you're tackling a mix of these. Can we go into a little bit more detail about what you mean? Do you have any examples, without naming names, but examples of how this plays out when you're working with people through this?
God, yeah, I mean, millions, well, not literally millions, but a common example is worthiness is a really common example, which in itself is a belief. It's a belief as to what somebody is worth. And I wrestled with worthiness for ages. It kept cropping up in my early years of coaching, and I never really understood it or could get my head around it. And then finally the penny dropped. And the concept I got from Mark Manson, the guy who wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F. And he talked about how we have imagine a y-axis, so the vertical axis on a graph. And that's an axis of how much we believe we are worth. It's like a self-worth scale. At the very top, you believe you're entitled and expect everything. At the bottom, you have no self-worth and don't believe you deserve anything. And we're all somewhere on that. And that's come from, again, the patterns, the words, the language, the behaviors we experienced growing up lead us to believing we are worth a certain level. Thing is, if we receive more than we feel like we are worth, we can't handle it, and we need to restore that balance. So if someone offers to pay us £100,000 a year salary and we think we are only worth 50, we'll either sabotage that job. We'll usually, especially the people I work with, they'll just work doubly hard in order to feel like they're justifying that pay. Or they will find sabotage in some other areas of their life, that they will sacrifice themselves at the altar of their work. And that's just a belief that they are not worth £100,000. Just so happens that someone's paying them that. So they've got to redress that belief somewhere else. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And as you're talking there, I'm writing words down like self-esteem and imposter syndrome, because I'm imagining too that there is sort of an intersection between those three. Self-esteem being subtly different to self-worth, but also the example that you used is, and I think those of us, probably most of us, have gone through imposter syndrome through our lives as well. And I recognize what you're saying. How do you see those three things interplaying?
Yeah, absolutely. Imposter syndrome comes up all the time. I mean, I had a client on her onboarding form 2 weeks ago say her goal is to help me overcome my imposter syndrome. And this is a woman who has achieved an incredible amount in her life. She's written numerous books, she's led businesses, she's won awards, she's given back to charity, she's gone through the ringer personally. And on the surface, you think she's nailing it, and she is in lots of respects, but she's still on a daily basis challenged by this idea of the fact that all of a sudden, any moment now, somebody is going to tap her on the shoulder and say, "What are you doing here?" And so, yes, that is a belief, and that ties into what she feels like she's worth, where she feels she belongs. And that is another massive can of worms, which we may or may not open on this chat about belonging and fitting in, because that ties in as well. And yeah, self-esteem, whilst I don't know the definition of self-esteem, I'd say that's probably on a more daily, short-term basis, linked to mood and personality and energy and everything else. And like, to what level do you feel like you are capable of achieving in any given moment?
Yeah, I'd probably add the word confidence to that as well, because it can then impact the other one. It can start to drive some of those self-worth engines that you were talking about there. And I totally understand the imposter syndrome bit. It's that niggling feeling. It's like someone's going to find me out here soon. It's that, surely. It's that I've suffered it. I still do to a certain extent in certain things that I'm doing. When I'm being asked to a client to do either a keynote speech or something with their C-suite team, and I'm thinking, why me? And going in there, and of course you've got all of this background. Of course you're doing like this lady, you're doing all of those, but you can still be held back. And how do you help somebody like that then? So with this person that you're helping, what are some of those levers that you can pull that can unlock some of these things, Jim?
Well, I think first off, they've got to quantify how much it's costing them, because if we're not motivated to change, I mean, change is riddled with uncertainty, because moving into something new is by definition uncertain, and humans are not programmed to thrive. We're programmed to survive, and that means avoiding risk wherever possible, usually. So we've got to quantify the cost of the imposter syndrome, or fill in the blank, whatever the challenge is. It's only then you can go, right, I really need to do something about this now. I'm prepared to go through those resistances in order to solve it. And then it's getting, okay, so what's the symptom? And most people focus on the symptom. The symptom is I've got low confidence, or I'm burnt out, or I doubt myself, or whatever. We've got to, okay, well, what's the cause? Where does the imposter syndrome come from? In what environments do you feel comfortable? Do you fit in? Do you feel like you are worth being in? And in what areas do you not? Why do you not? And often it comes back to childhood. I mean, I know I've worked with so many people who are adopted, who were at the hands of physical or emotional abuse repeatedly throughout their childhood. People who were told they weren't enough many times, usually because of the fears of the people that were saying it to them. And all of those things are going to lead very strongly to a place of not feeling enough, or not feeling capable, or not feeling worthy. And if you can start to uncover and identify those patterns, that's, I mean, it's not the be all and end all. It doesn't solve the problem necessarily, but it's a very, very good starting point, because then you can start to say, right, well, that's the belief or the narrative that's been invisibly pulling the strings on my life up to now. And with that awareness, you have the ability to actually then decide, not necessarily easily, it's not easy, but it's simple. You can decide if you want to carry on with that story and that narrative, or if you want to change it. And if you want to change it, what do you want to change it to?
Yeah, again, it's almost leading them to that crossroads, so they can make a choice rather than the straight road that they've always been on. These are those beliefs that hold you back, right, Jim?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's the point where a lot of people, even when they quantify the cost of it and they've been carrying it their entire lives, they still, it provides too many of their needs for them to change. There's comfort in a story that they have. There is comfort in the predictability of knowing that they're not enough and they're never going to get to where they want to get to. And that's soothing for a lot of people. As much as it doesn't serve them in the long run, it's soothing in the short run. And that's what prevents people from actually moving through these things.
And this doesn't happen overnight, of course. So you drive a very intensively coaching led approach for these people, these individuals at least that you're working with. And in the spirit of the Untamed, you do things a little bit differently. Can you tell us about your coaching approach and the benefits that comes out of that for coachees as well as yourself?
Yeah, well, I don't really care about the benefits to them, to be honest. I'm having a good time, therefore that's all that matters, right? But no, seriously, I mean, it's actually funny the amount of conversations I have with people who feel guilty that they're enjoying the work that they're doing, and that, I mean, that's another conversation for the day about mindset of abundance versus scarcity. And this, if I'm winning, somebody's losing. The work that I did on myself, I realized actually the more I'm winning, the more they're going to win, because when I'm in my best place, that's when I can serve people to a highest level. And my best place is being outside, moving, phones away, connecting deeply with myself or with whoever it is that I'm with, whether it's an individual, a pair of co-founders, or a team. Usually where they will let me, there's adrenaline or cold water or both involved. So when I do multi-day events, I mean, there's many videos on my website of people jumping off cliffs into cold water and whitewater rafting and doing all that kind of cool stuff. I think that's so important to break people's habits and get them away from the daily distractions, the anchors, the triggers that we just get so used to doing. I can't remember the quote, something like Dr. Joe Dispenza says something like, by the age of 35, 90% of who we are is a memorized set of beliefs and unconscious habits. And we just do the same things over again. We get out of bed the same way, we brush our teeth the same way, we drive, we start the car in the same way. And it's like anything that can break that pattern is beneficial, especially where learning is involved. So I use the nature and movement and activity as a vehicle to create transformation. And it's so amazing, especially in a team environment or a group environment, how powerful that can be, especially if we're staying away in a yurt or a log cabin or something like that. We've got a fireplace, a fire pit at night time. How quickly transformation can occur and how quickly deep connection can occur when you put all those ingredients together.
So, and I logically I can understand that being built in similar ways and trying to be a little bit more creative which is not necessarily where these other people are in the workplace. So when people leave these events or your coaching walks or whatever, what are they doing next, and what breakthroughs have they come back to you with that said, this made a real difference? So you're seeing the difference there, as you describe, around the log fire and so on, or outside when they're jumping in, they're discovering something new. How is that translating back into the workplace?
That's a good question. And one of the things I've wrestled with in the coaching work that I do and that I've received many times is, and I'm sure anyone who's been in any learning or professional development path knows that you come back for an event, you're high as a kite, you've got all these lessons and goals and objectives and intentions that you're going to definitely instill from now until the end of time. And that glow, no matter how good the exercise was, burns off at some point, or at least fades. So I've come to the realization that whether that lasts or not is on me only to a certain extent. So the lessons people, and I've also become unattached to the exact lessons people take away. That I realized that was my own ego and need for certainty that was driving my desire to try and control their outcome. So the more I've done it, the more I'm like, actually, their outcome I can't control. I can only control what I put in and create the space for transformation and connection and all those lovely words. So I can't give you a specific outcome for them. All I can say is that they, during that time, at some point, they have probably connected with a side of themselves that is authentic, that makes them feel alive, makes them feel at peace, makes them feel powerful in a non sort of egotistical way. And it's a side they want to bring out more. This event has allowed them to do that in a really trusting space, especially around strangers. Believe it or not, it's even more easily done in front of strangers who aren't going to judge you, that you don't know and you haven't got a past with, where you can be this new version. So they come away with an idea of, that's me. That even that glimmer, whether it was as I was shared something really valuable or put a tune on at nighttime and danced around like no one was watching, they're just a glimmer of who they are at their authentic self. And they have an intention of bringing that into their lives on a daily basis. And my goal is they design their life around that side of themselves. But as you say, that takes time.
So how I'm quite interested to find out whether I get what you're saying is that it's going to be different outcomes. They will decide themselves. They own it. But how many have come back to you and said, this is what I've done, or this is how I'm now feeling? Not just the can't thank you enough for what they went through, but maybe weeks have passed and they're actually taking the effort intentionally to come back to you. What are they saying?
The amount of times that I was disappointed early on, because I was like, oh, you haven't quit your job. I thought you said you were going to quit your job, because that looked like it was really like misaligned with you and everything else. Oh, you're still in that relationship, even though you kind of knew that you needed to leave. And I would judge that. I judge myself on that. And then the more time passed, I was like, actually, that was never what was needed in the first place. What was needed, it was for them to feel more grounded and connected. So the most common thing that I now embrace and I hear most often is, I don't actually know what's changed. I mean, nothing's really changed. I just feel better. I just feel more relaxed. I feel more at peace. And for me, that is all that's needed. The practical changes can come over time as and when they feel ready. But just being able to approach what the challenges they're currently facing from a position of peace and more self-assuredness is the only thing that matters, certainly in the short term.
Yeah, it goes to your symptom and root cause element before, and perhaps that, as you say, they're coming in with a relationship problem. They're coming in, I'm stacked at work, or I don't like this, when ultimately find out the problem might be themselves. Yeah. And that they're reconnected to themselves and finding joy in that again, or actually doing something to change that situation themselves, because it's not, in fact, the other person or the business. You never know, do you? But I'm sure that's a part of it if it's making them pause and think. Would you agree?
100%. It never is the cause. This could be a controversial statement, but what we have in our lives, apart from obviously there's events that happen that we clearly have no control of. The only thing we can control in life is how we react. But what we have in our lives, be it our financial level, our relationships, our opportunities, it's so much of that is linked to the decisions, the indecisions, the actions, the beliefs that we have held, and the thousands of decisions and indecisions we've made or not made up until this point. Now, I don't deny the impact of where we've come from that gives us more opportunities. Our privileged background versus non-privileged background, like location around the world. Yes, they all play a part, but we still attract things into our life based on what we believe or don't believe, and what we do or what we don't do. So yes, someone will come to me with, my problem is X, and they'll point to something external. That may be a problem for you, but it's certainly not the cause of that problem. Why are you in that relationship? Why have you carried this business down this particular path? Why have you allowed yourself to get into this level of frustration and burnout in your job? Let's go all the way back to the assumptions and the stories that got you to this place in the first place, and look there.
Yeah. And that takes some time for some people, but I imagine for others they really kind of get that at some points, and then really embrace what they're trying to do with you and get fully involved. So going back to your time in Australia, the event that you're at with PowerPoint slides, the lanyard that you were wearing, which you then ripped off and had an epiphany as you walked outside saying, this is where I want to be, Darling Harbour or wherever you were at the time. This is where I want to play. And that is what you have done. So you have lived that passion. You have approached this in different ways. You've really looked at beliefs, core beliefs for people. You've taken them back to nature in many ways to do this, whether it's individual coaching or these group events. So what are the key things you have learned from dealing with people since you started this?
Oh, that's a big question. What are the things I have learned when dealing with people? I suppose, to go back to what you said earlier, there's only so many patterns. And the more I've done the work, the deeper I have gone, because I've realized that's where the truth lies, that's where the beauty lies, that's where the pain lies. And that's where the work needs to be focused. It takes one of the biggest things I've learned is I can only connect with my clients to the extent I've connected with myself. So when I first started the work, it was very much symptom focused. It was more surface level. It was more, okay, you're in this job or you're running this business, but you're trying to do this task and you're clearly this kind of personality. So let's tweak it a little bit. And then the more I worked on myself, the more I realized how driven by fear and insecurity I was. I learned all the different sides of myself and how they were showing up, and which characters were serving me, which weren't. And the more I did that, the more I was like, oh God, this is where the conversation needs to happen. So it's just that the depth of the work has just gotten deeper and deeper, because if you're just focusing on the surface, you're only going to be able to affect things either short term or to a surface level extent.
Yeah, and those three things are really important, being connected to yourself first, because it enables you to understand others and then connect with that second element, which is to spot those repeated patterns and potentially patterns that you've spotted in yourself and with others, or these that kind of are across all of the people that you see. And I do like the point that you make about taking them deeper for the truth and getting past all of the fluff and the varnish that might be there, and really scraping underneath the surface to find out what's there, where you get the true epiphany is the word that you used, I think, before as well, for them and potentially for you in that. So let me flip that question round, Jim, and say, for those tuning in that, like me, are nodding furiously, I'm sure, with what you've been saying, and understand this, that sometimes we just have to go deeper to understand what are the things that are driving us, why are things happening like that. So those that want to kind of continue this on, what would be the 3 or 4 tips that you would suggest to get going down this road?
I'd say first and foremost, surround yourself with people who support where you want to get to, rather than just people who are comfortable with where you are now. And often, unfortunately, that means often not family members or your intimate relationships or friends, because often they are with you or surrounded by you because of who you are now, not who you could be. So there could be those, and I hope it is for your sake, but make sure whoever's around you, not 100% of the time, but a lot of the time, is supports where you want to get to and can give you honest feedback. And I suppose point 2 would be to seek feedback on how you show up, but also how you might be authentically. And this may be your family who know you deeply from childhood. Ask your parents or long-term friends, like, who was I as a child? Right, I know who I am now, but what was I like before I became an adult with expected behaviors and learned patterns? Like, was I free flowing and carefree? And did I just not care if what I wore and if my hair was all bedraggled and what I spoke about? And have I lost that over time? Whatever that version is for you. Those 2 starting points would be so powerful, and be honest and brave enough. You've got to be honest. You've got to be brave enough to ask, and you've got to be honest enough to accept what you hear. Because, I mean, Jesus, people say they want change. They don't. They want change that is predictable, that they can live with. But when you're going out to get feedback like this, it can be extremely painful, especially if depending on what you hear and who you get it from. And you've got to not take it personally and go, I sort this out, and I'm accountable for what I hear, and it's up to me how I respond. Because so often there is truth in that. And like I say, it's often painful. But as my coach said to me, your greatest gifts lie next to your greatest pain.
That, I don't know how I'd describe accountable listening, being able to do something about that. So surrounding yourself with people who actually want to help you take you forward, not hold you where you are now necessarily, talking the most positive way here. And the need to seek honest feedback from a mentor, from somebody else, from whoever that is, who can help you understand what they've observed about you. And it's a really good question that you raised about going back to somebody who knew you in the past. From personal experience, the question that I at one point wanted to get to is, where did I lose my spark? Because I had that. And once I found that, understanding what you've said before this, Jim, as well, is that's where my breakthrough came. But it took the third point for me, which I totally get to, which was having to be very honest with myself and very accepting of that, and very accepting for my part in it as much as others' parts in it, and where I was complicit, if you like, in that journey of self, versus actually where I had choices to make and made the wrong ones or made the right ones, without necessarily having somebody who was helping me, through that.
That's so key. I love that example, and I think maybe even a first step or a pre-framing step before the finding the right people is, you've got to frame this in the right way. If you go into this thinking this is going to be a painful exercise, someone's going to make me change, even though it's you driving it, I'm going to have to change, I'm going to be somebody I'm not, and I'm going to have to quit my job, and I'm going to have to be different, I might lose my relationship, you're never going to do it. Like, you're subconsciously or consciously going to hold yourself back from this path of self-discovery, or whatever you want to call it. You've got to reframe this and say, well, actually, rather than what's the cost of doing this, what's the cost of not doing it? And we're driven more by avoiding pain than we are by gaining pleasure, as negative as that sounds. That's just the way our brains are wired, I believe. But so go into it saying, what's the cost of not doing this? And also, like, if I go on this and I do discover my authentic self and I rediscover my spark, how good is that going to be? Like, I've achieved all this in my life, despite the fact I'm yet to find and reconnect with my authentic self. So if I can do that and layer on all of this wisdom and experience and relationships and all that good stuff that I've got, wow, imagine how amazing that's going to feel. Like, if you go into this journey with that belief versus one of doom and gloom, the outcome is going to be vastly different.
Well, it goes back to what you said before as well, is that in fact, almost beating yourself up in the first parts of this business, when people were coming back saying, no, I'm still in the relationship, still in the job. Actually, what you'd done was help find that spark again. And that was the important thing. That was the thing that was missing. It wasn't these things that they brought as challenges to the party at all. So Fascinating, Jim. Thank you so much for spending the time. I could talk way more on this, and I'm sure that many tuning in can too. So how do they get in touch and find out more?
My website is becomeuntamed.com. There's a quiz on there that's quite useful, helps you discover how close you are to your playground and to what extent you know yourself. You can also contact me through their website or on LinkedIn, Jim Hughes. They're the two main methods. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I think it's a great tool, so I'd be happy to answer any questions or have a quick 15-minute connection call with you if you feel like I can help.
Jim Hughes, thank you very much for joining me. Excellent conversation.
Thanks, Jeremy. My absolute pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rethink Leadership podcast with me, Jeremy Blaine. Please like, comment and support us on your favourite platform and subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch as well as listen to each episode.